The Sigma 14 to 24mm f2.8 HSM Art has the potential to be an excellent lens for both content creators and filmmakers, but it has one crippling flaw, and I found that out the hard way. Okay, so I've got this lens on loan from Sigma for about a month. They're not paying me to make this review, they just kind of sent it my way because I wanted to see what was up. Is it any good? The only way to do that is to go up. Early morning, we have to beat a snowstorm out in the Rockies, but does my face look funny? Because I'm at 14 millimeters right now. That's 6 to 18. That's the thing with travel, man. You just don't know what you're gonna get. You gotta kind of cross your fingers, and you make do with whatever you have. I look at the radar and the forecast and you should get out of there by 3. Last night I was thinking about getting up this early, and I was like, oh man, that'll be terrible. And I realized I'm on a totally different time zone.
Yeah, it's only 7:30.
It's like 7:30.
I'm the only one having a hard time reading up right now.
The snow is so cool.
So cool. Somebody say cool.
I started with the 14 to 24mm in the Rockies. Wide-angle lenses are great for landscape photography, and this is no exception. I'm not really into pixel peeping though, so I'll leave those tests for people who are way better at it than me. To my eye, the images are very sharp, and they don't suffer any weird lens elements like ghosting or chromatic aberration. When all the way back at 14mm on a full-frame camera, there doesn't seem to be much natural vignetting at all, which is really impressive. Any of the vignetting that you see in these photos that I'm showing, that's all been added in post by me, because I kind of like the way it looks. Oh, and look at this Sunstar. It's freaking dope, if you like Sunstars. But image quality isn't the only thing to consider when you're making a lens choice, and I did run into a few issues with the actual lens design when getting these images. First, the good stuff. It's weather resistant and it has a very solid build quality. Both the focus and zoom rings are super smooth, and the glass elements have a water and oil resistant coating on them. The problem is, to achieve a super wide angle zoom lens like this, there is a lot of glass involved. At over 1,100 grams or 2.5 pounds, this is not at all a light choice when you're rocking up for a 10+ mile hiking trip. It's also relatively large, so it does take up a good amount of space in your bag. Of course, neither of these things are an issue if you're planning on shooting in a studio setting or more production level documentaries. It's just more important to know if you're doing run and gun stuff or planning on taking it for a hiking trip. This big old front element also caused me some frustrations because it's so large and kind of domed outward that they had to build in a lens hood to protect it. The problem is, with this domed glass and the built-in hood, there's no way to screw on a lens filter to the front of the lens. There's no thread at all. You're also forced to use this massive custom cover, which is well designed and it goes on nicely, holds on tight, but it is just bulky and it's a pain in the butt to take on and off the lens if you're going in between shots. I spent most of my time hiking with the lens cover off, which is a little bit risky, especially when taking one wrong step off of the trail results in you going into snow up to your knee. Despite the imminent snowstorm and dangers of post holing whenever you go off trail, the Rockies were just magnificent. Words don't do them a justice whatsoever. But music might. I get all of my music from 80s inspired synth to epic cinematic scores for mountains from Epidemic Sound. I decided that they would be an awesome sponsor for this video because they have over 40,000 songs and 90,000 sound effects, all perfect for soundtracking anything from YouTube videos to documentaries to epic adventure films. All of Epidemic's assets are restriction free, and they have licenses tailored to both YouTube content creators and commercial video producers, ensuring you always have the license and the tools necessary to soundtrack amazing videos and keep those videos copyright claim free, giving you peace of mind and time to work on that next big project. Speaking of that next project, I have a link down in the description below that will enable you to soundtrack it with Epidemic Sound totally for free. You'll be able to try out the site, have full access to their catalog for a week. That way you can try it out for yourself and see why it's my favorite music licensing service for anything from my YouTube videos to soundtracking awesome mountain adventures like this. Speaking of videos, there is an issue here with the Sigma lens. The lack of threaded filter compatibility is not a huge deal when it comes to photos, but this is kind of a big downside for video shooters. The f2.8 aperture is a huge selling point of this lens, but it becomes completely useless when you're filming in highlight scenarios because you have to crank the aperture way up to compensate for that extra light coming in since you don't have an ND filter in the front. I was living between f11 and f22 for all of these shots, which is not the worst thing in the world in this case because all of the nature surrounding it is super cool and it's awesome to see the mountains in focus on all of these shots, but even still, you completely lack that bokeh and the depth of field that most people see as being cinematic. This isn't as much of an issue when you're shooting in studio settings or like a run and gun documentary though, because most cinema cameras have built-in internal NDs, and if they don't, well, you'll still have a lot more time to rig it up with a matte box. The lack of thread really just kind of makes it impossible to use as a vlogging lens, and that is a pain in the butt for creators. There's no optical stabilization on this lens, so all of the warble that you're seeing around the corners of that shaky footage is all due to the internal image stabilization of my Canon R6. I really should have turned that off because it looks terrible. Despite being an EF mount lens adapted onto an RF mount on my Canon R6, this lens has some excellent autofocus. Even at f2.8, it still tracks the subjects really well. I had to come back to gloomy Ohio to film this portion of it because of, you know, the whole no lens filter thing. You can see it's keeping pretty good focus track on me. Even it's at f2.8 right now. I'm not filming in log because well, you know, I have to keep the ISO low. But yeah, really pretty impressive. What do you think? This is Ohio. The focusing motors do produce a little bit of noise, but it's not nearly as loud as my Canon 16 to 35mm f4. That thing is like, it's like a band, man. It is so noisy. On a crop sensor cinema camera like my Canon C200, the 14mm focal length gives you a nice wide 22mm equivalent look. And the flexibility of this zoom range, especially when combined with the Sigma 24mm to 70mm f2.8 art, makes it a great option for video production companies or DPs that want a wide range of focal lengths just in two lenses, f2.8, and you don't necessarily need any sort of filters put in front of the lens. I highly recommend this lens if you want that wide look on a camera like the C200 and you don't necessarily have a worry about the size or weight of your rig. If that's you, this is a great lens. If you're a vlogger, a videographer that just wants to be lightweight and move quickly, can't really recommend it for you. It's not a great vlogging lens. I shot all of this mountain footage on my Canon R6, and if you want to know what I think about that, you should watch this video over here. It's not the best option, and on top of all that stabilization warble, this video will tell you why you should probably consider something a little bit different here in 2024.